The flames consumed everything chrome leather, memories of 15 years on the force. Margaret Whitfield stood in her pristine doorway, arms crossed, watching Detective Jake Morrison's prized police motorcycle turn to ash in the HOA burn pile. "Rules are rules," she sneered, not knowing that in 12 hours she'd be staring down the barrel of a state investigation with Jake's badge gleaming in the morning sun. Some rules, Jake thought as he watched his bike die, are about to change forever. The acrid smoke still hung in the air when Jake Morrison pulled into his... But nothing could have prepared him for the charred skeleton, sitting where his 1995 Harley-Davidson police special had been parked that morning. His hands trembled as he killed the engine of his unmarked cruiser. The motorcycle, his grandfather's bike, passed down through 3 generations of law enforcement, was nothing but twisted metal and melted rubber. Even the custom in memory of Officer Patrick Morrison plaque had been reduced to slag. No, the word escaped his lips like a prayer, like a plea to a universe that had already made its cruel decision. Jake's knees nearly buckled as he approached the remains. The chrome exhaust pipes, polished to mirror finish just last weekend, were now blackened sculptures of destruction. The leather seat where his grandfather had sat during 40 years of patrol work was gone entirely, leaving only the metal frame beneath your back. He spun around to find Margaret Whitfield standing at the property line, her gray hair pulled into its signature tight bun, clipboard clutched against her chest like armor. At 63, she was the undisputed queen of Riverside Manor's Homeowners Association, and she wore her authority like a crown. "What happened to my bike?" Jake's voice was steady, professional. Even in his civilian clothes jeans and a Ravens t-shirt, he couldn't shake the cop cadence. Margaret's thin lips curled into what might have been a smile on someone with a soul. "Your motorcycle was in violation of HOA, Covenant 47B, no commercial or emergency vehicles parked in residential driveways overnight." It wasn't commercial. It wasn't even active duty. That was a classic bike that had police markings. Margaret consulted her clipboard with theatrical precision. "I documented 17 separate violations over the past month. You received proper notice." Jake's mind raced. He'd been working double shifts on the Castellano case. His mail had been piling up, unopened. "You burned my grandfather's bike." The HOA board voted unanimously. When residents fail to comply with written warnings, we're authorized to remove violations at the homeowner's expense. She handed him a pink slip. "You'll be billed $347 for the removal service." The paper crumpled in Jake's fist. "You had no right. I had every right. This is a respectable neighborhood, Mr. Morrison. We maintain property values through consistent enforcement of community standards." Margaret's voice carried the satisfied tone of someone who'd never been challenged. "Perhaps next time you'll read your mail." Jake stared at the debris field that had been his most treasured possession. 3 generations of Morrison men had ridden that bike. His grandfather Patrick had bought it used in 1975, fresh out of the police academy. His father Michael had inherited it in 1998, rode it until cancer took him in 2009. Now it belonged to Jay Corhad. Until this morning. The HOA has authority to destroy personal property. Jake's detective training kicked in, cataloging facts, building a case. When that property violates community covenants, absolutely. Margaret's chest puffed with righteous indignation. "Mr. Morrison, I don't know what you do for work. I'm a cop." The words hung in the night air like a challenge. Margaret's confidence flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Well then, you should appreciate the importance of following rules." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and the burn pile needs to be cleared by Sunday, or that's another violation." Jake watched her retreat to her Tudor-style fortress, motion sensor lights, tracking her progress like a prison yard. His phone buzzed a text from his partner Danny Rodriguez. "Court got postponed. Castellano hearing moved to Thursday. You good?" "No," Jake thought, staring at the cremated remains of his family legacy. He wasn't good at all, but he was thorough and patient and very, very good at his job. Jake spent the next hour documenting everything, digital photos from every angle. His phone rang at 12:43 a.m. Captain Lisa Chen's voice was crisp despite the late hour. "Morrison, we've got a situation. Anonymous tip came in about Castellano. Someone wants to meet tomorrow." "What kind of tip?" "The kind that breaks cases wide open. Riverside Manor Development, 6 a.m., they'll find you. Captain, that's where I live. Even better, you know the area. This could be the break we've been waiting for. After hanging up, Jake stood in his driveway, pieces clicking together in his mind. Anonymous tips didn't happen by accident. Someone in his neighborhood knew something about the biggest drug trafficking case the state had seen in 5 years. Someone was scared enough to reach out in the middle of the night. Someone who might have witnessed more than they'd bargained for. Jake looked up at Margaret Whitfield's house. Her bedroom light was still on at nearly 1 a.m. In 23 years of police work, he'd learned to trust his instincts. And right now, every instinct was screaming that his burnt motorcycle was connected to something much bigger than HOA violations. His phone buzzed again. Last week, he'd noticed the same white Audi A4 parked on different streets throughout Riverside Manor. Always at night, always gone by morning. He'd run the plates out of habit, but the results had taken time to come back. Now they had. The Castellano drug network was operating in his neighborhood. Someone had burned his bike to send a message. And tomorrow morning, he'd be meeting an anonymous informant 50 yards from where he now stood. Jake Morrison wasn't just a homeowner anymore. He wasn't just a grieving grandson who'd lost a family heirloom. He was a state trooper who'd just discovered that his HOA president might be connected to the biggest case of his career. The pieces were falling into place, and Margaret Whitfield had no idea that by burning his bike, she'd just lit a fuse that would expose everything. Tomorrow morning was going to be very interesting indeed. As he reached his front door, movement caught his eye. A white Audi A4 cruised slowly past his house, windows tinted dark. License plate catching his porch light just long enough for him to confirm it was the same car. The same car now knew exactly where he lived. The same car that would be in 4. A very unpleasant surprise come dawn. Jake Morrison might have lost his grandfather's bike tonight, but Margaret Whitfield and whoever she was working with had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They'd declared war on a state trooper, and Jake Morrison had never lost a war. The morning mist clung to Riverside Manor like a guilty secret as Jake Morrison positioned himself behind the old oak tree at 5:47 a.m. 13 minutes early, standard protocol for any meet. His service weapon sat comfortable in its shoulder, holster beneath his jacket, and a digital recorder hummed silently in his breast pocket. The neighborhood looked different in the pre-dawn light. What had seemed like suburban paradise when he'd bought the house 3 years ago now felt like a stage set to perfect, to clean, to orchestrated. Every lawn mowed to regulation height. Every mailbox painted regulation black. Every rule followed to the letter. Except for the rules that really mattered. At exactly 6 a.m., a figure emerged from the shadows near the community mailboxes. Jake recognized her immediately, Alina Vasquez, the young woman who lived in the corner unit with the perpetually dead garden. She was maybe 25, always kept her head down, always hurried past when neighbors tried to make conversation. Today, her hands shook like autumn leaves. "You, the cop." Her voice was barely above a whisper, thick with an accent that spoke of fear learned young. Jake stepped into view, badge out, but not threatening. "State Trooper Morrison, you called this in." Elena's dark eyes darted toward Margaret Whitfield's house, then back to Jake. "I seen things, bad things, but if they know I talked, .. She pulled her thin jacket tighter. "They kill people who talk." "Who's they?" "The woman with the clipboard. The one who burned your bike last night." Elena's words tumbled out in a rush. "She ain't just HOA, she's something else. Something worse." Jake felt the familiar tingle of a case breaking wide open. "Tell me what you've seen." Alina glanced around one more time, then began, "I work nights at the hospital, cleaning crew. I get home around 3 a.m., parked behind my building where nobody sees. But I see everything from my kitchen window." She pointed toward Margaret's house. "Every Tuesday and Friday, cars come. Nice cars. They park in her garage, but I can see the license plates when they pull in. Always different cars, but same pattern. Stay for exactly 30 minutes, then leave. How long has this been going on? 6 months, maybe more. But last month," Elena's voice dropped even lower. "Last month, I seen them bring boxes, heavy boxers, 2 men carrying each one, struggling. They bring them in at night, take them out before dawn." Jake's mind cataloged the information. Tuesday and Friday drops, 30-minute windows, heavy, cargo requiring multiple handlers. It fit the Castellano pattern perfectly. Did you recognize any of the cars? Alina nodded, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. I write down plates. My cousin Luis, he got mixed up with bad people a few years back. Before they killed him, he told my always, write down plates. Evidence keeps you alive longer than silence. Jake's blood chilled as he read the list. 4. Of the 6 license plates matched vehicles they'd been tracking in the Castellano investigation, the white Audi that had cruised past his house was at the top of the list. Alina, this is crucial evidence. But why now? Why call it in today? Her eyes filled with tears. Because yesterday, I seen something that scared me more than anything. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Mrs. Whitfield, she came to my door, said there was complaints about my garden, about my car, about everything. Said I had 24 hours to fix violations or face severe consequences. That doesn't sound unusual for Margaret. No, you don't understand, Alina grabbed Jake's arm. She knew about my cousin Luis. She knew he was dead. She knew things about my family that ain't in no HOA files. She said people who don't follow rules in this neighborhood sometimes ... disappear. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Margaret Whitfield wasn't just running an HOA. She was running a front operation for the Castellano network, using covenant violations as cover for intimidation and elimination of potential witnesses. She's been threatening residents into silence, Jake muttered. Not just threatening. Elena's voice broke. Remember Mr. Kim? The old man in Unit 47? He died 3 months ago. Heart attack, they said. Jake remembered. Quite old man, kept 2. Himself always complained about late-night noise. What about him? Week before he died, he told me he was going to call police about cars coming and going at night. Said it wasn't right. All the noise, all the strange people. Next week, paramedics taking him out in a bag. Heart attacks happen. Alina, especially 2 elderly, his daughter told me at the funeral. He was healthy, just had physical. Doctor said his heart was strong. But day before he died, Mrs. Whitfield visited him, brought papers to sign. He was scared when she left. Kept saying he should have minded his own business. Jake's detective instincts were screaming now. 3 potential witnesses in a neighborhood. An elderly man who complained about noise. A young woman who worked nights and saw everything. And a state trooper who happened to live in the middle of it all. One was dead, one was being threatened. And the third had just had his most prized possession destroyed in a very public display of power. Alina, I need you to come with me to the station. We'll put you in protective custody while no... She backed away. You don't understand. I can't leave. They got my little sister. She's only 16, but she's here illegal. Mrs. Whitfield knows. She says if I cause trouble, 1 phone call gets Maria deported. 1 phone call gets her sent back to people who'll hurt her. Jake's fists clenched. The Castellano organization was known for leveraging immigration status to control potential witnesses. They'd turned an entire neighborhood into a hostage situation. We can protect both of you. Witness protection, new identities. A car door slammed in the distance. Both Jake and Alina froze as Margaret Whitfield's garage door rumbled open. The white Audi A4 backed out slowly, windows still tinted black, moving with deliberate menace. They seen us, Alina whispered. Oh God, they seen us talking. The Audi stopped directly in front of them, engine idling. For 30 seconds that felt like 30 years, the car just sat there. Then the passenger window rolled down with mechanical precision. Margaret Whitfield's face appeared in the opening, but she wasn't alone. A man in a dark suit sat beside her, face partially hidden but unmistakably threatening. Good morning, Mr. Morrison. Margaret's voice carried across the quiet street like a funeral bell. I hope you're not having any ... difficulties with your new neighbor. Alina pressed closer to Jake, trembling. Just being friendly, Jake called back, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. Community building. Margaret's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. How wonderful! Community is so important, don't you think? We all have to look out for each other, make sure everyone understands their place. The man beside her leaned forward, and Jake caught a glimpse of his face. Vincent Castellano Jr., the boss's nephew. The enforcer they'd been hunting for 8 months. Especially, Margaret continued, when people are new to the neighborhood and might not understand our ... customs. She was talking to Alina, but looking at Jake. The threat was clear as crystal. Back off, or the girl disappears. "Well, Jake," said his voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "I've always been a quick learner when it comes to local customs. I'm sure you are." Margaret's smile was winter cold. "By the way, don't forget to clear that debris from your driveway by Sunday. We can't have the neighborhood looking untidy." The window rolled up, and the Audi pulled away with predatory smoothness. Alina was crying now, quiet tears of absolute terror. "They gonna kill me. They gonna hurt Maria." Jake put a protective arm around her shoulders, mind racing through options. He couldn't arrest Margaret without evidence. He couldn't move against the Castellano operation without backup. And he couldn't protect Alina and her sister without blowing his cover completely. But he was a state trooper, and state troopers didn't abandon civilians to monsters. "Alina, listen to me very carefully. I'm going to protect you and your sister, but I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" She nodded through her tears. "Good. Here's what we're going to do." Jake Morrison had spent 23 years learning that the most dangerous criminals were the ones who hid behind respectability. Margaret Whitfield thought she was untouchable because she had a badge of suburban authority. She was about to learn that there were badges with a lot more power than hers, and the man wearing one of them had just declared war on her entire operation. 48 hours later, Jake Morrison stood in the pre-dawn darkness outside Margaret Whitfield's house, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, 12 federal agents and state troopers moved through Riverside Manor like shadows, each one carrying warrants that would tear Margaret's perfect little kingdom apart at the seams. Alina and her sister Maria were safe in witness protection, their testimony already recorded and sealed. The license plates Alina had so carefully documented had led to a network of shell companies, money laundering operations, and enough evidence to bring down half the Castellano organization. But Jake wanted more than arrests. He wanted justice for his grandfather's bike, justice for Mr. Kim, justice for every resident who'd lived in fear under Margaret's twisted rule. Eagle, one in position, crackled through his earpiece. Captain Chen's voice was sharp with anticipation. "All units report ready." Jake checked his watch. 5:47 a.m. Same time he'd met Alina 3 days ago. Same time Margaret's world had started crumbling, though she didn't know it yet. "Remember," Jake whispered into his radio, "Margaret Whitfield is dangerous, but she's not the real target. Vincent Castellano Jr. has been staying in the house since Tuesday. He's armed, he's desperate, and he's facing life in prison. No heroics." Through Margaret's kitchen window, Jake could see movement. She was up early, probably preparing for another day of terrorizing her neighbors. In 6 minutes, her perfect little world would end forever. At exactly 5:53 a.m., Margaret's garage door began to open. The white Audi started backing outright into the path of 6 unmarked police vehicles that materialized from seemingly nowhere, boxing it in completely. Federal agents. "Exit the vehicle with your hands visible." The Audi's engine revved, but there was nowhere to go. Vincent Castellano Jr. was trapped, and he knew it. Margaret's front door flew open, and she appeared. In her bathrobe, clipboard somehow still clutched in her hand even at dawn. "What is the meaning of this? This is a private community. You can't, Margaret Whitfield, you're under arrest." Jake stepped out of the shadows, his badge gleaming in the porch light. Money laundering, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and accessory to murder. Her face went white as fresh snow. "Murder. I never killed anyone, Mr. Kim. Alina Vasquez found the digitalis in your garden shed yesterday when she helped us execute the search warrant. Same digitalis that stopped his heart 3 months ago." Jake's voice was cold as January steel. "Funny thing about natural heart attacks, they don't usually happen to people who've just been poisoned." Margaret's clipboard clattered to the ground. For the first time in 3 years, Jake saw her without her armor of authority, and she looked exactly like what she was. A scared old woman who'd gotten in too deep with people, too dangerous. "I didn't want to kill him," she whispered. "But Vincent said he was asking too many questions. Said he'd seen the Tuesday drops, was going to call police. I just put a little in his coffee when I brought him the papers to sign. I thought it would just make him sick. Buy us time 2. To what? Intimidate him like you intimidated Alina, like you tried to intimidate me." Behind Margaret, the sounds of the federal raid echoed through her house. 20 years of HOA meeting minutes that were actually coded drug shipment records. Financial documents showing how covenant violation fines were used to launder Castellano money. Photos of residents who'd asked too many questions. Vincent Castellano Jr. was dragged from the Audi in handcuffs, his expensive suit torn from struggling. With the agents as they passed Jake, Vincent spat on the ground. "You think this ends anything, cop? My uncle's got 10 other operations running. This was nothing." Jake smiled grimly. "Maybe, but those other operations don't have something I'm very motivated to shut down." "Yeah? What's that?" Jake gestured toward. The charred remains still sitting in his driveway. "They didn't burn my grandfather's bike." As Vincent was loaded into the federal transport van, Jake turned back to Margaret. She was sitting on her front steps now, hands cuffed behind her back, looking smaller and more pathetic by the minute. "Why?" Jake asked. "You had a good life here. Respect. Authority. Why throw it all away for drug money?" Margaret's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. "You think I chose this?" "Vincent approached me 2 years ago, said they needed a legitimate front in a quiet neighborhood. Said all I had to do was look the other way when certain residents had violations." She looked up at Jake with eyes full of regret, but looking the other way became covering things up. Covering things up became threatening people. Threatening people became ... became murder. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to keep my neighborhood perfect." Jake knelt down. To her eye level, Margaret, perfection built on fear isn't perfection, it's tyranny. And tyranny always falls. As the federal agents led Margaret to their vehicle, she turned back one last time. "Your bike. I really am sorry about your bike. I know it meant something to you." Jake watched her disappear into the back of the sedan, then walked over to the debris pile that had started it all. Captain Chen joined him, surveying the twisted metal. "Hell of a thing," Chen said, burning a cop's bike. "Did they really think you wouldn't investigate?" "I don't think they knew I was a cop until it was too late," Jake replied. Margaret thought she was dealing with just another resident she could intimidate. She had no idea she'd just handed a state trooper the evidence to bring down her entire operation. Chen kicked at a piece of charred chrome. "What are you going to do about replacing it?" Jake smiled, pulling out his phone. On the screen was a photo from the evidence locker, a pristine 1995 Harley-Davidson police special, seized from Vincent Castellano's personal collection 2 hours ago. Funny story about that. Turns out Vincent was a collector of police memorabilia, had a garage full of vintage cop bikes, including one that's identical to my grandfather's. Jake's grin was sharp as a blade. "Asset forfeiture laws are beautiful. Things you're kidding, dead serious. Judge signed the order an hour ago. Vincent's bike collection is now evidence in a federal case, but after the trial, ... double quotes, Jake shrugged. Well, the state needs to dispose of seized assets somehow." Captain Chen laughed. "Morrison, sometimes I think you're more dangerous than the criminals we chase." As the last of the federal vehicles pulled away, neighbors began emerging from their houses. Alina appeared first, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. She walked straight up to Jake, with her head held high. "Officer Morrison," she said formally, then broke into a smile. "Thank you for everything." "Thank you, Alina. You're the real hero here. Without your courage, none of this would have happened." Other residents began gathering people Jake had barely spoken to in 3 years of living here. Mrs. Patterson from Unit 23, the young couple with the new baby from Unit 15. Mr. Chen, no relation to his captain from the end unit, who'd always seemed nervous around Margaret. One by one, they shared their stories. Harassment over minor violations, threats disguised as neighborhood improvement suggestions, fear that had kept them isolated in their own community. "What happens now?" asked Mrs. Patterson. "I mean with the HOA." Jake looked around at the faces of his neighbors. No longer strangers. Now you decide. You elect a new board. You rewrite the covenants. You build the kind of community you actually want to live in. As the crowd dispersed, Jake stood alone in his driveway, looking at the remains of his grandfather's bike one last time. Tomorrow, he'd clear away the debris. Next week, he'd take delivery of Vincent Castellano's seized Harley. But tonight, he'd call his father's sister in Baltimore and tell her the story. Tell her how Grandpa Patrick's bike had somehow reached beyond the grave to bring down a criminal organization. Tell her how 3 generations of Morrison family service had come full circle in the most unexpected way possible. Jake Morrison had lost his grandfather's bike on Tuesday night. By Friday morning, he'd gained something far more valuable: a neighborhood free from fear, a community ready to heal, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes justice comes disguised as revenge. Margaret Whitfield had burned the wrong cop's bike, and that mistake had just cost her everything.